How do you deal with a boss who tells you you're too ambitious when you put together your performance review and you're thinking about what you want to achieve over the coming year? How do you handle that? Some would think that, oh, you would just clap back and you'd be like, no, rah, 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 rah. In reality, though, it's far more difficult to know how to handle a situation like that. It could be that this person clearly has what is termed as positional power. So they have a higher position than you. And so you find yourself in this, how do I handle this? Because let's face it, if somebody came at you maybe outside of work and said, oh, you're just too ambitious, you would probably really push back and say, what are you talking about? Mind your own business. What do you know? You don't know me that well. You don't know how I perform. You would definitely be like that, or maybe some of you wouldn't. But the bottom line is, how do you handle situations like that? First, I want to examine maybe why a manager or a leader would say you're too ambitious. What I see here as a business coach, psychologist, what I see here is that individual that would say something like that to you, they are dealing and being faced with their own inadequacies, and you actually are highlighting them because of your ambition and your drive. When you have people blocking your progression, it's very difficult to move forward because they'll be looking at you, again, looking at their inadequacies. And unfortunately, you become a victim of their stuff. Does it make you feel good? It takes away your power. It begins to erode your confidence more than likely. I mean, how could it not? When someone says, why are you, so ambitious? You're too ambitious. It took me X number of years to get to this position. Why are you trying to get there so fast? See, the strong and courageous individual would simply respond and say, no disrespect, but I know what I'm capable of. And that's ideal, right? That's ideal. But in reality, that positional power that they hold over you, maybe on an unconscious level, it might be reminding you of people that had high positions in your life. Maybe this is through culture. Maybe culture says for you to respect your elders or respect people in authority. So therefore you silence yourself and you say nothing. And then you suddenly find yourself, you've lost your confidence and everything like that. And unfortunately, that's how it runs, right? If you have that cultural influence inside that's showing up when there is positional power in front of you. Should I say, the interesting thing about culture is that when we go into a space where our culture is not the dominant group, then we find ourselves in a place of discomfort, maybe, in a place where, your voice is not as loud as the dominant group in the midst of it all. And so then your culture is shining through. Unfortunately, though, your culture may then disempower you, right? So what I'm saying here is it is important to be yourself and to show up wholly at work. However, sometimes in that space, I think there's a certain level of kind of taking that that authenticity to the edge before it turns into a code switching or a covering. So I can go into an environment where my culture isn't the same as the dominant group's culture. Well, I know that I'm different. I know that I'm standing, on the outside or a feeling of standing on the outside looking in. So I'm a minority in that space. So what do I do? What is taking it to the edge? Well, there's a certain level of adaptability that has to take place when we are in a business space, in an organization. There is a certain level of adaptability or assimilation, but be mindful because, again, if we go beyond assimilation or adapting into that environment, if we go beyond that, then we risk losing our identity. And that is that covering aspect and that code switching. And we don't want to do that because on a psychological level, it's not sustainable. So you may think, though, you may think that, well, it's sustained me thus far, but it may not in the end. It may be so different to who you truly are that therein lies the problem. Now, this has also been advantageous to people that I've spoken with. You know, it's been to their advantage to kind of assimilate in a way that was comfortable to them. And that's a good thing, right? So what they're doing is they're taking it to the edge of comfort. If they cross over, it's the edge up to discomfort. And that, I think, is something particularly diverse talent has to think about and be very conscientious not to lose themselves in that assimilation to an organizational culture. Now, how do you do that? Well, this is how we do it. We do it by staying consciously present. We stay present in ourselves and present in how we show up. So if we're going to a meeting, say with senior stakeholders or middle to senior stakeholders, we're very present. And that's in any meeting, I should say. We have to stay present. We can't be in the meeting that just happened. We can't be in the meeting that's going to be after this meeting. You can't do that because you're not present. By being present, you know, well, let me say how you get present is you just simply, you can have a mindful moment, you take a breath. And you calm down and you stay focused to say, okay, now I'm going into my 1 o'clock meeting. My 1 o'clock meeting is about this. Sometimes our meetings are back to back, which causes us to potentially lose presence because we're just jamming and jamming and jamming. However, everyone is allowed to pop to the bathroom before a meeting. Now, if you're chairing that meeting, of course, then you're going to have to think about that meeting that's on the one you're leaving, going to the next one. You may have to leave that meeting early. You need to give yourself 5 minutes to come into presence, to be focused for the new meeting that you're walking into. And that's how we protect ourselves from going over the edge into discomfort. We don't want to code switch. We don't want to cover who we truly are. We can assimilate. If I have a strong accent, does it behoove me? Does it benefit me to just maybe work on my pronunciation? Of course it benefits me. Of course. That's not covering. That's not code switching. It means that I'm going to work on my edges. I'm going to work around my rough edges because I've moved into a new culture where my accent isn't the norm. So I'm going to work on myself. The cost benefit. What's the cost? What's the benefit? Again, not talking about code switching, not talking about covering. So that's when we're present. So going back to our scenario of the person being told, you know, you're too ambitious. If you're present in that performance review meeting and that comes up, you're going to have to stand for yourself. You're going to have to push back. See, it's like this. If you have children or goddaughter, godson, you have nieces and nephews, you know, if they're telling you that they're getting bullied, are you going to say, just take it on the chin, just keep to, it'll change? No, you're not going to say that because you're a grown up and you know how, you know, when people bully you, it's horrible and how it's very difficult to come back from that bullying. It has long-term lasting effects. So you wouldn't tell that child to just take it on the chin. So why would you take it on the chin? Well, because of positional power that I talked about. See, positional power is very real. But what we need to do is when we come back into presence, we recognize that that person is just an individual, just a human being like me. When we take them out of the hierarchical position and bring them down on the same ground, we can have dialogue. We can push back. And we can push back in a way that is classy, in a way that is strong. It's not easy. You know, especially if maybe you've been told certain things by this person in position, and they've made you feel less than, smaller, insignificant. But here you are on this video, and you're trying to break these habits. You're trying to push you back in a way that's safe, that's classy, that makes you feel good, that makes you feel empowered, and for you can go out there and fight another day. My name is KK Harris. I'm an executive coach and a business psychologist. This is KK's Career Advice, and I'm here to help you grow in your career and be the person you want to be every day when you show up to work. How do we push back when people tell us we're too ambitious, we're too driven? It takes practice. Anything new takes practice. Well, what practice is this, KK? I might not get the same opportunity every time. Well, that practice can come in the form of rescripting. Okay? Rescripting. Rescripting is a way to create inside of your body, right? See, the mind, if you replay something, an incident that happened to you, you replay it over and over, and I'm sure we have all done this before. You replay a situation that's happened to you over and over again. What then happens is your body responds as if it's happening in the moment. That moment may bring you to tears, may bring you to frustration and anger. You feel all of this for that person that did you wrong. It's coming up. Your belly is on fire. You want to fight somebody. It's because the mind has no way of determining what is real and what is not. So by utilizing this idea, this tool of rescripting, you can have a better outcome the next time. By rescripting it, we're recreating the scenario the way we want it to go. Let me say that again. With rescripting, we're recreating the same incident, but in the way that we want it to go in order to override the negative memory, to override it. And so we literally pen and paper, here we go, we rescript it as if it is happened. So Bob just said this to me, right? So instead of you recalling the way how you responded, I sat there shocked, I was upset, I felt like crying or tears came to my eyes, etc., etc. This time when Bob, as you rescript, says you're too ambitious, I then said, oh, thank you for noticing. You can turn it into something that's light. Make a little giggle out of it. If that isn't good, you can give them a response and say, you know what? I've been told that before, and it's also helped me get to the next level every time. So thank you. You can play with that. You can rescript that. You can write that over and over again. When I was a girl, if you got in trouble, you had to write what was called standards. Right? I don't know who's in the room. Probably none of you guys know, because standards was old school. So you had to write 100 times on the chalkboard, I will da-da-da-da. I will not do this. I will not da-da-da. Over and over and over again. And that was a certain form of scripting, rescripting. Instead of you, and if the teacher was smart, they would say, I will always behave in class. So they had you write that over and over and over again. The idea is that it's rescripting and it's embedding into your psyche. Let me tell you this. Quite often, if you have responded in the same type of way when situations come up, say feedback, every time you go to listen to feedback, you get yourself stressed out. You can't take it. You're worried before you even go into your meeting. Every year you do that, or biannually you do that. See, what it is you've created memory in your body. You've created that memory into the unconscious, and the unconscious says, when it's time to do a feedback, I've got data for that. I've got something. This is what you're supposed to do. You need to get really, really nervous right before the meeting. Your heart should be racing. Your stomach should feel sick. You should not prepare your response to feedback. You should not prepare yourself to go in there to share what is good about you through that year or through that half year. See, if you respond have responded that way time and time again. That is always going to be your response. I see it time and time again. I have coached hundreds, if not 1,000 people over my career. I wouldn't be surprised if it's that number. Okay? Or even more. That's how long I've been coaching. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to rescript. We're trying to rescript the response, the behavioral response to the trigger. I saw the negative in feedback. I thought it was always going to be negative because I had a critical parent growing up. So I was always expecting that horrible feeling to come back, and it always did. And it always did. And I didn't sort that out until almost 2 years ago. I just thought, what am I doing here? You're a psychologist. Work it out. Figure it out. And so I started doing a little bit of research on habits and triggers and responses and addictions to habits and this and that and the other. And I realized that I have the power to turn it around, to respond in a new way. Now, that doesn't mean that I or you won't be triggered and some of that old behavior comes back up. That doesn't mean that. Because old habits do die hard. We've heard that saying before. Old habits die hard. Well, you think about it. If you've been in your career 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you've always responded to feedback like that, like how I described, then why wouldn't it die hard? It's like the path of least resistance. I know what that feels like. If I do something new, that's uncomfortable. That's discomfort. When almost 2 years ago, when I decided to do something new, I knew I needed something to ground me. So what I did was I got Michelle Obama's book, Becoming Michelle Obama. I got her book and I took it and I put it in my lap. And I put my hand, I just opened a page. The page it wasn't like this profound moment or anything like that, but I opened the page and I just grounded my hand right on that page so I would remain present. I was listening for anything that was going to be advantageous for me to become better at my job. And there was something in that. The rest I let go of. Bosses can do things on automatic pilot. We're all these human beings, right? We can all do things on automatic pilot. Take, for example, you're asked by your partner, somebody, to go to the store to get some milk. You've been to your grocery store, umpteen times, right? So what do? You got your phone in your hand. You're ready to go on over there. You're talking to a friend. You jump in the car. You don't even think about it. You just turn on the car, and you zip out the garage, wherever you're going. You go over to the grocery store. You go in the grocery store. You head directly to where the milk is, right? That's automatic pilot. And then what they do in the grocery store is they literally, every now and again, they'll move that milk. They'll move that milk 1 or 2 over. So there might be about 3 or 4 cooler sections. They'll move that milk over. Why? Because they know people respond and behave in automatic pilot. If we move it, then it's going to mean KK is walking down an aisle that now has something she didn't even think she needed. But she sees it, the chocolate mousse. Oh, I'm going to give me some chocolate mousse too. So I grab me some chocolate mousse. I grab me some, Gouda cheese. And then I start looking to the left and right and start looking up at the signs trying to find the milk. They just got 2 more products sold because I had to get out of automatic pilot. And it's slightly uncomfortable because you're like, oh God, I'm just in a rush. I got to get the milk back, right? So there's a slight level of discomfort. But there's also the satisfaction in purchasing something. Maybe you did need dessert. Maybe dessert was nice. You were ready for some of that. Maybe your kids wanted some cute little mousse, chocolate mousse, or some Gouda cheese, right? Whatever. So we are doing the same thing. Bosses are doing the same thing. Their statements can be automatic pilot. I have heard so many times as an executive coach how the boss tells them, my introverts, they tell them, oh, you need to speak up a bit more. You need to speak up. And they'll say that time and time again, and they're growing and they're speaking up more and they're contributing. But see, the habit, the unconscious, just automatic pilot comes in and thinks, oh, yeah, I'm with KK. I can't even think about KK. Oh, you need to speak up more. Why? Because automatic pilot remembers trigger seeing KK in this performance review. Another trigger, performance review, is saying, hey, yeah, she needs to speak up more. Now, if I sit there and I allow somebody to put that on me, the shame on me. And don't start saying they don't like me because. We got to take certain responsibilities for ourselves, our own behaviors and our own actions that are involved in the discussion that's at hand. So we talk about that positional power. Now we're talking about performance review, and we're talking about you're being too ambitious. So here's your solution is to rescript. I talk about being present. Be present. That way you can make sure you're not going into an old emotional behavioral response to that trigger, right? The trigger of feedback, the trigger of whatever, performance review. You got to be present. You got to be present in your mind so you can handle these situations in a way that's going to make you feel better, right? When you push back and say, no, that makes you feel better. When you push back and somebody says your performance, you haven't been speaking up in the sessions, in whatever meetings, whatever, and you have, well, you have better kept a log of your the value that you've been adding to the business. Speaking up is value. Let me put that down. Spoke up around this on May 25th, right? Whatever. See, we have a responsibility to ourselves. We can't look to, in my world, we can't look to the other to respond in a certain way that was going to make us feel better. We can hope for the best, but when we're present, we know how to deal with it when they don't. When they say things that can have the potential to erode our confidence. So I want to ask you this question. What do you need to start doing in order to find that courage, that boldness, that pushback? What do you need to do? Is it rescripting? Is it one-to-one coaching? Is it listening to a podcast to help lift you up? What do you need to stop doing? Do you need to stop being silent and taking it? Ask yourself those questions. Tell me about it down in the chat, if you will. We have a lot more power than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. Quite often we're reliving the past. Anyways, my name is KK Harris. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast with me here. Oh, stay strong, my people. Please keep coming back and I'll keep delivering. Bye for now.